Cool. There we go. So I think just about everybody knows me, but if not, I'll just give a quick introduction. My name is Matt West, and I'm the instructional technologist in the city. And one of my roles is to provide support for Panopto, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today. It's going to be less focus on how to like record lectures and more focus on how to use kind of existing Panopto recordings inside of your course. So let me open up my, let's see here, get this open in another screen. There we go. Okay. It's always a struggle dealing with multiple monitors sometimes. There we go. Okay. So we're going to talk about, can everyone see my screen? Cool. So we're going to talk about using Panopto in Canvas. And it's a little bit different than how it works in Blackboard, but kind of the same concept there. The first thing I wanted to ask is just a question to go around. Have you guys used Panopto before? Does everyone know what Panopto is? So Panopto is a lecture recording platform. And the really nice thing about Panopto is that it's a piece of software that gets installed on the computer and it records your desktop and it ingests the PowerPoint presentation if you're using a PowerPoint. And it also can record your webcam and the microphone. And before COVID, it was used heavily like in the classroom, like faculty would record their live lectures and then upload them for students to watch like after class or in case like someone missed class. So it's really useful for that, but it's also useful for teaching remotely as well, because you can record lectures on your own computer and then share them with your class. And Panopto is really designed, and we're going to talk about kind of the differences between these tools, just because we do have quite a few tools at Rush that seem to overlap in some ways. So Panopto, like I said, is a lecture and screen capture tool. So that's its primary purpose. And some people get confused sometimes with like when to use Panopto and when to use Zoom. But Zoom is really not a lecture recording tool. Zoom is like an online collaboration tool, kind of like what we're doing now. So one thing I always tell people is think about who the audience is. If you're going to have people in the session, then you definitely want to use Zoom for that, because Panopto is not going to let you have people like join in on the session and watch it. Obviously in the classroom, that's a different story. But if you're just wanting to record a lecture, like let's say that you have a guest lecturer who is not going to be presenting in front of students and just wants to record something on their own time to give to you to show your students, that's a really good use case for Panopto. And back to what I was saying earlier, Panopto works a little bit differently than like Zoom, for example. Like Zoom, we always need a constant internet connection because it's always like sharing stuff with other people. But Panopto, you don't. Panopto is an application that's running on the computer, and you don't even need an internet connection when you're recording the lecture. The only time that you do need an internet connection is after you finish the lecture and you want to upload that to the Panopto cloud. You will need internet for that. But other than that, you don't need internet at all. So some people have really appreciated that fact that they can like be on vacation somewhere and don't have to worry about internet. They can record a lecture. And then when they get back to a place that has a stable internet connection, they can upload that lecture. And just some more perks about Panopto is that everything is stored in the cloud. So it's a cloud recording, and we have a 3-year retention policy with Panopto, which is quite a bit better than the Zoom recording policy. Basically, the way that it's set is if you have a recording that has not been viewed in 3 years, then that one would get deleted. But if someone goes in and watches the recording, that resets the 3-year clock. So it's pretty nice. Most people appreciate that fact that they can reuse those really high quality recordings like over and over. And then we also have Screencast-O-Matic. That is also like a screen capture tool, but kind of the difference between Panopto and Screencast is Panopto really is built for like an education environment in mind. It's going to ingest the PowerPoint, and it does a nice job of it creates like a table of contents page, and students can like click around and go to different parts of it. Whereas Screencast-O-Matic is just a screen capture tool. So I would say the difference between those two is Screencast is good for those like quick, maybe like 5-minute recordings, and Panopto is better for like a traditional lecture that might be like an hour or longer. But we have all these tools at your disposal, and some of them might overlap at times. Like, if you're giving a lecture through Zoom and you want to record that, that's totally fine to do as well. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions about the differences between those tools, but hopefully that adds a little bit more clarity to that. Cool. So this is the agenda for today. We're going to talk about setting up Panopto in your Canvas course for the first time, deploying or linking a recording in your course. So that's like adding a Panopto recording to your course. That way students can see it. Also reusing Panopto recordings from like maybe another course in the past, and also how to organize those. And if you use a master shell, we'll talk about that as well. And then also checking permission issues and like troubleshooting those access denied emails that I'm sure we've all gotten before when students like try to click on something and they don't have access. So setting up Panopto in your Canvas course is super simple. You just want to go under, and I'll show you guys how to do it in a second, but you want to go to your course and then click on settings. And then at the very top, you click on navigation. And then you just want to make sure that the Panopto video link is like shown in the course menu there. So I can show you what that looks like here. So I'm going to go into my sandbox course, and I think I'm pretty sure I already have it turned on here. Yeah, I do, but let's just pretend that it wasn't turned on. So I'd go here to settings and then go up to the top to navigation. And by the way, this is how you can organize and hide and show things for anything that's in the course navigation in your Canvas course. So normally Panopto video would probably be down here at the bottom, and it tells us that it's disabled and won't appear in the navigation. And to make it available, all you have to do is drag it and drop it up here. Or if you want to, you can click on the little 3 dots, and I don't know why it's showing disable, but maybe it just got confused there. But the easiest way is just to drag it up to the top and then click save here. And by doing that and clicking on Panopto video, so clicking on the link here, that's going to provision your course for Panopto. And what I mean by provision is it's making a folder on the Panopto cloud on the back end, and it's creating what's called user groups. That's where your students get enrolled in. So it's basically setting up your course to be able to use Panopto. That way, if you wanted to make recordings, you go into the Panopto recorder, you would be able to see your course listed there. Another nice thing too is if you use the course copy / import tool in Canvas, it will automatically do that for you. So you shouldn't have to do this ever if you've already set it up for like that one time. So let's say that you're copying from a master course and you've already set up Panopto in there. If you do a course copy from that master into like a live shell, it's going to automatically set up Panopto for you. So you don't have to do this every semester. It's really just for new courses that have not used Panopto before. And so that's how you provision your course. That's kind of the first step, because otherwise you won't be able to deploy anything to your Canvas course, and those user groups won't be set up and all that stuff. So let me open back up the other page. Okay, so that's how you set up Panopto in the course. The next step is assuming that you already have Panopto recordings recorded, which I'm assuming probably just about everybody does here. There are 2 ways in Canvas to add a Panopto recording to a course. And it's really just personal preference which one you would prefer, but I'll show you guys both of them. There are links here that's in the lib answers. It's actually, you can get to it from Blackboard if you click that Help for Instructors tab, but there's two different links here, and I can maybe afterwards I can email those to you guys. But I'll show you how to set up Panopto recordings in both ways. So let me get that your screen back open. So one of the ways is from any text box in Canvas. And it can be like an announcement, it can be a discussion board, it can be like on a page. So for this one, I'll just set up an announcement. And anywhere that you have this, Canvas calls it the rich content editor. It's this little toolbar right here that's got like, the font and bold and all that stuff. If you click on it's the plug button, looks like the electrical plug. Then you select Panopto Video. This is going to pop open a window, and it defaults to this particular courses folder. So if I want to, I can deploy this recording to an announcement. So I can click this recording here, the little radio button beside it, and then click Insert. And it's actually going to embed that recording into an announcement. And then I can save this announcement, and then all of my students are going to get it along with the Panopto recording in there. And you can see here that I can start playing the recording and it works just fine. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is you can add a link directly to your module if you want to. So let's say that I'll go under my module 2 here, and I want to add a link to a Panopto recording for students. So I can click the plus button here. And then if I go under external tool and then find Panopto video, it's going to open up basically that same page. So I can even deploy that same link if I want to, and then click insert and then click add item. And it just added a link to that Panopto recording here. And if I want to make it available to students, I can publish it. So the last one was essentially embedding the video, like it shows up like basically inside of Canvas. This one here is, if I click on it, it's going to open up Panopto in a separate window. So it's not embedding it, it's just kind of adding a link to your course. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's whichever one you guys would prefer to set up. I know some people, they use like pages when they're designing their course. And you can also add Panoptos to a page as well. So I think I have, let's see if there's anything in this welcome page. Yeah, so I could even go through here and add a Panopto recording just using that same plug button from the rich content editor. And it's nice enough that it actually remembers my recent selection here. So I could go back in and add that same recording there if I wanted to. So those are the two ways of getting a Panopto recording into your Canvas course. And if you guys work with an instructional designer, your instructional designer can also help with how to organize that, like what might be the best way to add the recording, whether it's a link or actually like embedding it in a page. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions. And if not, I'll keep trucking along. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is reusing Panopto recordings and also like how to organize them, like master shells and all that good stuff. So ask yourself, do you plan on reusing your Panopto recordings? Some people don't. Some people, like prior to COVID, they were recording the lecture in the classroom and they didn't really want to reuse those, maybe unless it was like a guest speaker. So you didn't have to worry about it. You just add the recording to the course folder. And then after the term is over, you don't even have to think about it anymore. But if you do want to reuse Panopto recordings, you have to think of a couple of things, actually probably more than a couple of things. FERPA is always like the thought in the back of my head. Keep in mind that if you do a recording and students are present, so like if it's a classroom recording, you do have to be really careful with that. If it's got like student names in there or even student speaking might be considered a FERPA violation. Really think hard about that one And you could probably reach out to like one of the instructional designers and kind of get some advice on that. We're not experts in FERPA, but we might be able to guide you in the right direction there. Um, Also, think about whether like you really need students to be in there. So for some of the recordings that I've seen, it would have just been equally as beneficial for the like the guest lecturer to just pre-record the Panopto recording on their own time, do a really high quality recording, just without students or anybody in there, send that to students, and then maybe do like a Q&A session through Zoom. And that way you don't have to worry about FERPA at all because there's no students present. And those type of recordings I actually prefer because you can reuse those semester after semester. You don't have to worry about like students asking questions and like background noise from the classroom, or if someone kept their microphone on or something like that. So just a few suggestions there. Also think about how frequently your content needs to be updated. So if you do plan on reusing recordings, think about how often that content like gets updated. You know, if there's like certain terminology that gets updated from time to time, just kind of think about those things. And that might help guide you whether you want to use like that Panopto recording just for that one term or keep reusing it. The other thing that I'll talk about as well is organization. And this is something that can get so tricky with Panopto because, like I said, each course has a folder. And if you reuse recordings and you're reusing some that are like from the past like 5 terms, it can get out of hand with organization. There can be like recordings in your course from, let's say, I don't know, fall 2019, spring 2020, summer 2020. And sometimes it can get hard to find those and keep them organized. And no telling how many times someone's reached out to me and they're like, I really need help finding this recording. I think it was done this year and I can't find it. And I've got so many folders that are showing up and so many different recordings. So what I recommend doing in that case is if you know that you're going to be reusing a recording, you really like it, it's a good high quality recording, it's one that you don't want to have to redo every semester, you want to keep using it, put it in the master folder, like the master shelf folder. And that way you know where it's located and you don't have to go searching through 10 different semester folders. And there's some instructors that they put all of their Panopto recordings in the master folder, and it's just easier for them to look through one folder rather than 10 separate folders. So just keep that in mind too, especially as you're moving from Blackboard to Canvas. Like maybe a lot of those recordings that were in 5 different folders in Blackboard, meet with us, like your instructional designer, whoever, and we can help you organize those, get those moved over into like a single folder in Canvas. That way they're just easier to find. Is organization is so important. And especially when we talk about like the permissions in just 1 second, that can get equally as difficult because if you have recordings in 5 different folders, you have to keep track of 5 different permissions for like 5 different folders. So it just makes it easier if they're all in one folder. But on the flip side of that, if you're doing a recording that you don't want to reuse like ever again, it's totally fine to put it in the current semester folder just because you're not going to reuse it. You don't even have to think about it, just dump it in there. Or if you want to, you could put it in the master folder and then even delete it after the term is over. So just throwing out some ideas there. Some people even do like subfolders. You actually can create inside of Panopto, like inside of a course folder, you can create subfolders in there. And so some people organize their recordings by topic or by the year that they were done, anything like that. So just kind of coming up with some ideas of keeping them organized, especially since we have thousands of recordings in Panopto and it can be a little bit tricky to keep up with them. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is checking for permissions issues. This is like the number one issue that people always have with Panopto is the permissions behind the scene. Let's say an instructor will say that, oh, I've got this recording deployed to my course. and I can play it just fine, but my students, they say that they can't play it. And then I'm getting bombarded with these emails that say access denied. Like, what's going on with that? And it happens every term. And it's usually related to a permissions issue that's kind of behind the scenes. So I want to talk a little bit about, it's a little bit techie stuff, but I'll try to like make it fairly easy to understand. But essentially what happens is whenever, let me open up Panopto here. Whenever you deploy, whenever you provision your course for Panopto, it creates a folder behind the scenes. And this is the folder right here for my course. So it's just called MatWest Sandbox. That is the Panopto folder for this course. So that's the first thing that Panopto does. The second thing that it does is it creates what's called a viewers group and a creators group. And it's a users group that has people in the group, and that's what controls access to the folder. So the viewers group is for students and the creators group is for faculty. And whenever you provision your course, whoever is in that course at that time enrolled in there, that's who's going to be added to those users group. So if you set up your users, if you set up Panopto, like let's say on the first day of the term, and any students who get added after that, they won't be automatically put in that user group. And sometimes that's what triggers those access denied errors. But I want to show you guys how to troubleshoot that. And as always, please reach out to me or any of the instructional designers if you have any trouble with this. That's what we're here for. We're more than happy to help. But if you're one of those people that likes to kind of troubleshoot stuff on your own, just to take a look, you can always go into the Panopto folder and take a look. So you want to check, first of all, you want to check and see which folder the recording is. So like, let's say that students were having trouble viewing this folder right here, the enable Panopto one. What you could do is open up the recording and then open up the folder that it's in. So I'm going to go to this folder right here. So I've got the recording open. I'm going to click on this folder here. And then I'm going to click on this little 3 dots that are like interconnected button, and it's the share button. And this is going to show you who has access to this MatWest Sandbox folder. And right now, only this users group has access to that, these two right here. So the viewers group and the creators group. But if you have a live course, trying to think I can find one to show you guys. If some of them might have like 20 different courses listed here, especially if it's a master folder that's been used for a while. But you just want to make sure that your current course has access to that folder. And what it'll look like is, let me see if I can find one here. So if I added, let's see, there's going to be a lot that shows up, but let's say that like this course right here, HSC 414, if let's say I was teaching that course, I would want to make sure that this viewers group is showing up down here. And that's one of the most common problems with that access denied thing. The nice thing is Panopto should do this for you automatically. So when you copy a course from one semester to the other, Panopto should automatically configure this stuff for you. You shouldn't have to do anything to configure this, to configure this manually. Sometimes, I don't know why it is, but it doesn't always work right. So if that's the case, just take a look here and just make sure that your current course is showing up there. And it should be the viewers group because that's the one where the students are located. So that's kind of the first step, is checking the folder permissions and making sure that your current course has access to that folder. So this is especially important if you're using like a master folder. You just want to make sure that your 22 spring class students have access to that master folder. And like I said, it should be a totally automatic process. The next step that you can try is if you are sometimes there's a couple of students that have issues getting access to a recording. So like, let's say you're teaching a class of 50 students and like 2 or 3 students are saying, hey, I'm getting this access denied error, but nobody else is. That would tell me that it's probably not a user group error. It probably has something to do with that particular student is not in that viewer group. And essentially how that happens is the student probably added the course, like enrolled in the course after the viewer group was created. And you can check who's in the viewer group if you want to by hovering over it and see if I can get it to do it. And then this little blue text shows up here. And if I click on that and then go to membership, that's going to tell me who's in this viewer group. And right now I've just got Abby Test in there. So that's what I do when I troubleshoot those issues for you guys is I look in here and, let's say it's Bob Smith who's like not seeing it. I check the user group and make sure Bob Smith is in there. And 9 times out of 10, the person's like probably not. And clicking on to get the student into the user group, what you can do is a couple of things. So the easiest way to get that student in there is for them to click on the Panopto video link in the course menu. When they click on that, that like basically touches Panopto and it will automatically configure that student's permissions. Recording links in the course, so like what I showed you guys earlier, that doesn't always trigger the permissions. And sometimes it's like a cookies thing. I don't know if like third-party cookies is blocking it or it's the browser or something. So it doesn't always work, but like 100% of the time, clicking on that Panopto video link in the course menu, that will add the student to the user group. But I know it's a lot of like techie kind of permission stuff, but if you ever have any trouble with that, just please reach out to us and we'll be glad to troubleshoot. But ideally, this should be like a seamless process. When you do your course copy, everything like gets moved over. Just recently, over the past 2 weeks or so, I was working with Panopto and we tweaked a couple of the settings. So hopefully that should make it even more smoother like copy process for the summer term. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions about like the whole permissions thing. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is Q&A. So finished up a little bit early. I didn't want to focus too much today on how to make a Panopto recording. I kind of just wanted to talk about how to set it up, how to add links to your course. And one idea that I had, if people might be interested, is kind of how to organize those, maybe show you guys how to move those recordings or how to copy them. People be interested in seeing that? Sure. So before we get to questions and answers, I can show you guys how to get to like the main page of Panopto. And one page that you can bookmark is rush.hosted.panopto.com. I know it's a really long link, but let me post it in the chat. And this is like the main page of Panopto here. And mine's going to look a little bit different than yours, but you should have access to a couple of things in here. So the first thing is your My folder on the left side here. This is like a personal recording folder just for you. So if you ever wanted to do like a test recording or something you didn't want to share with students, you can put those in here. So that's why I put some of these in here. It's a good place to store them.
Hey, Matt, we're still seeing your Q&A page.
Oh, okay. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. That's the struggle with having 3 monitors. So on rush.hosted.panopto.com, this is the main page here. And then this is that My folder that I was telling you guys about. One thing you'll have to be careful with is when you do recordings, for whatever reason, the Panopto recorder software defaults to your My folder. And I know a lot of people have had that problem before. They're like, I created this recording and it ended up in my folder. How can I like move that? But that's a really good question. And you can move a recording or copy a recording there's a couple ways actually. The easiest way is just to click on the little check mark right here and you can do either a move or a copy. I would suggest doing a move in most cases. So you just click the move button here, and then you start typing the name of the folder. And I've got access to like literally everything all the way back to like 2013. But if you start typing the name of it, like NSG, I don't know, 510, this is going to show up all the NSG 510 folders. And so let's say I wanted to put that one in like the master folder for NSG 510. I could select that folder right here and then click move. So I could move this folder or move this recording from my folder to the master folder. And this is the same process that you could take to move recordings from a like live semester folder to your master folder if you kind of want to start that like organization process. And to see which folders you have access to, if you click this browse button here, you will see any folder that you have been given creator access to, meaning that you can like add stuff to the folder. So you guys that have been teaching a while and using Panopto for a while, you're probably going to see a lot of folders here, but you can navigate to pretty much any of these folders and see what's in there and kind of take a look at like older stuff too. And you can also move things in bulk if you wanted to. So if you wanted to like completely, let's say, clear out this folder and move everything to like the master folder, you can check all these boxes here, or even check the one at the top, and that does like a select all, and then do move, and then put in the folder name here, and then click move. The next thing that I can talk about is, let's see here, subfolders. So I talked briefly about adding folders within a folder. So right here in my folder, I actually do have a subfolder called Zoom recordings. And you can add a new folder if you want as well by clicking this add folder button. So I've seen some people do this. They organize it by topic or year or something. So I can even add a folder here.
Maybe.
Just call it test folder. And you can add as many subfolders as you want. So that might be another good way of organizing things, especially if some people have like hundreds of recordings in a particular folder. So organizing them by subfolder might help as well. And just another couple of things I can show you that might help you like see them easier is you can change the view type. So this is like one that has the thumbnail here along with the title. If you don't want to see the thumbnail, you just want to see the text, so that way you can fit more on the screen. You can click this detailed list view, and that's going to show you basically all the same recordings you saw before, but it's just got the title here and the duration and the date. So you can fit a little bit more on your screen there. And then there's this view here that just shows the thumbnails. So whichever one you would prefer. And if you ever need to go up a folder, so like let's say I go into this Zoom recordings folder, there's nothing in here, and I wanted to figure out how to get back to the previous folder, you can click this little up button here, and that will take you back to the previous folder. So I think that's about everything. I wanted to pause there and see if you guys had any questions, anything about Panopto. I know there's a lot more stuff to talk about with Panopto, but I kind of just wanted to focus on the basics today, like how to reuse recordings and how to set it up in your Canvas course. No questions. So just to get some information, do you guys mostly reuse your Panopto recordings from semester to semester, or do you do new ones every term? Just curious to know like what, kind of what the percentage is.
I think, well, at least for the acute care management, before it was made known a couple of years ago about the FERPA issues, they were reusing them all the time, updating content, but using the basic. But since that email went out a couple of years ago, we've stopped pretty much doing that because all of our recordings have student involvement.
Yeah, I think that is, I think that's kind of what I've noticed too. Like prior to COVID, a lot of people were doing classroom recordings, and I don't know. It's hard to say like what percentage of people were reusing them and what percentage were not, but I don't know, maybe 50-50 or so. I definitely saw some of the larger, like the larger auditorium classroom ones, those were reused, and the smaller classroom ones, I haven't seen as many of those being reused. So I guess it just depends on the particular course and the particular lecture. And maybe if it's a guest lecture that's really hard to get to show up, something like that. Anybody else? Any questions about Panopto? All right. Another thing I just thought about too is some people put their Zoom recordings in Panopto, and that's totally fine to do as well. If just keep FERPA in mind. So if you are using a Zoom recording that has students in there, student names, anything like that, that might be one that you probably don't want to reuse. But other than that, if you're giving a lecture and you've got all that stuff turned off and students aren't saying anything, yeah, you can totally get Panopto recordings into, or Zoom recordings into Panopto. And I can show you guys how to do that as well. There is a way to add what's called existing media, which would be like basically an MP4 file. There's a way that you can add that into Panopto. Let me share my screen one more time. If you, from any Panopto folder, if you click on the create button and then you click on the upload media button, this will allow you to, you can drag and drop the file in here, or you can click on it. It'll open up that little file dialog, and then you can upload any file in here. It can be like an audio file or like an MP4 video file. So this is how a lot of people get their Zoom recordings into Panopto. And we talked a little bit about the Panopto retention policy. And also the nice thing about Panopto is that we're not billed based on storage. So we can put as many videos in there as we want. We're billed based on usage hours, which is like essentially when somebody watches a recording, we get billed for that. So that would also be a nice place to like archive your recordings if you wanted to. And if nobody's watching them, then we don't have to pay for it at all. So kind of a nice perk there. Yeah, and this would work for videos recorded to Screencast-O-Matic as well. So Screencast-O-Matic does have that cloud storage option, and then it's also got one where you can record to the desktop. So if you wanted to, you could do like a quick Screencast-O-Matic and then upload that MP4 file into Panopto. And one of the perks I would say about Panopto compared to using something like Screencast-O-Matic is Panopto, you can restrict access to recordings based on who's enrolled in what course. Whereas, like a YouTube link, anybody could email that to their brother, cousin, whoever, and get access to it. But Panopto is going to check and make sure that when somebody clicks on the play button, they have access to view that recording based on what class they're enrolled in. So that's what makes Panopto more geared towards like Canvas and Blackboard versus like something like OneDrive or YouTube or Screencast-O-Matic. Any other questions? All right. Well, if there are no more questions, I think that's about everything that I had for you guys. I can follow up with an email that has those the two links for adding the recording or adding the recordings to your Canvas course. And other than that, you guys have my email address. Let me put that in the chat. It is cityhelp@rush.edu. So that's where you can go for Panopto help. There we go. So feel free to email me anytime and I can help you with any Panopto questions that you have.